to go live. If anybody is out there, I don't think anybody's there yet, but if anybody does pop up, tell me in the chat if you can hear me. Let's see, let's move this over, get some space going. No worries, move things around. I got a huge desk, but I just don't use it all. That's the problem. I don't use it all. But let's see, do we have anybody in the chat yet? No, I don't think anybody in the chat yet. We'll wait for maybe some people to show up. Hopefully we'll see if some people will show up, and then we'll get to chatting. If not, we'll just get down to the nitty gritty, because I'm going to try to maybe film for like a good hour and a half. Not too long. We'll try to breeze through these, so we'll see. But what we are doing today, if you cannot tell, I want other people to show up in the chat, those people to be here. But as I said, most people can tell by the thumbnail for this video that we are going to be talking about James Bond today, one of my favorite franchises, 007. Gonna be having some beers tonight too, just chilling. Kiddo's asleep, so I have my ranking here of all the 25 Bond films. So this is what we're going to be going through tonight. I got my ranking of all of them from worst to best. This is just my opinion, of course, and I didn't include the non-Eon production Bond films. So there's a Casino Royale that came out before Daniel Craig's. That's kind of like a campy, like Austin Powers type jokey version one. And then Sean Connery did a film called Never Say Never Again, which is kind of a retread of Thunderball, which I actually am a fan of that film. I really do like that film. It would be pretty like high up on the list if I was to include it, but I'm not going to include those two. So this is just going to be all the ones in the Eon production universe of James Bond films that we're going to be going through tonight. But if you guys can hear me, let me know in the chat if you can hear me. I know I see we have a thumbs up and a couple people in the chat right now. Let's see. I wish, and we're mainly doing this just because my laptop is still down. So I had it fixed for like a day and then it crapped out on me again. So we're going to do this live. And like I said, I really wanted to go through this and finally get this ranking out of these Bond films, finally get it out there so people could, chat, leave theirs in the comments and all that kind of stuff. Bond's one of my favorite franchises. So let's get into this because we have a couple people here in the chat already. Hopefully you all can hear me. Hopefully the thumbs up means that you can all hear me. But we have 25 films to get through. So I have some notes, there's a lot of films and I binged them over the last couple like months. So it's like, I wrote like quick notes on some of them and stuff like that. So we'll get into it right away. With number 25, the bottom of the barrel for me, my least favorite of all the James Bond films is going to be Die Another Day. Pierce Brosnan, I'm not a huge fan of Pierce Brosnan. Like, that's just one of my things. He was not the era of Bond that I really enjoyed. And Die Another Day was his last film. This was his last outing. This is the one with Halle Berry. She plays Jinx. And it's just, it's one that it has so many interesting things, like these little subplots in the beginning with Bond getting captured and traded over to the Korean government and tortured, and then he comes back. So like there's this like tension between him and M and all this stuff. So like there's this weird kind of like subplot in the beginning that just gets dropped. And then we go on to him trying to track down the dude who's kind of responsible for him getting caught and stuff like that, Zhao, and like there's this other colonel and all this stuff, and Gustav Graves is one of the other villains too. Like Zhao and Gustav Graves, like I just wasn't into them. The real Pierce was the most beautiful Bond. I've heard that a lot. I've actually heard that a lot. That a lot of women, a lot of men think that Pierce Brosnan is the most handsome of all the Bond actors that we've had. I'm a sucker for Sean Connery. I'm like really old school. I like Sean Connery, but this Die Another Day one, it was that era too when CGI was not. It was very ambitious, like creators and what we wanted to do, but the CGI wasn't amazing yet, and it doesn't age that well. So when you watch the film like 15 or 20 years later, it just like doesn't age that well. Pretty much once we get to like the Ice Palace, that's when this film kind of falls apart for me and all that kind of stuff. Like it just gets too wild, it gets too comic booky, and that's why Die Another Day is sitting here at the bottom of the barrel. I do like Rosamund Pike though in this film. She plays Miranda Frost. She was a really good femme fatale. She's like the villain chick. Like, oh, she was really amazing. I like the fight scene she has with Jinx. So there's some cool moments in this film, but it's not one that I return to very often at all. Excuse me. But now we're going to be on to our next one because we're going to try to get through this. Like I said, record for like maybe an hour, hour and a half. But number 24 is going to be A View to a Kill. And I'm not a huge fan of Roger Moore either. I do like some of his films because you can go kind of campy and silly with his. But A View to a Kill is his last film. And I think by this film, you can tell that Roger Moore aged out of the role for James Bond. And I just don't think like he was really like the direction for this film and all that kind of stuff, the quippy one-liners, a lot of the action sequences they do in this film, you can tell it's the stunt doubles. Like it's like another film that I think they should have just moved on. I don't think they really should have kept Roger Moore. I think they should have moved on or maybe did a different story. I'm not mad at Christopher Walken though and Grace Kelly. They're the villains in this film. Mayday, or she plays Mayday, and he's Max Zorin. So those are the villains in this film, which is pretty cool. But like everything else, like is just not good about this film. It's not one that I return to, and like there's some cool like action sequences, but it sucks because you can definitely tell that it's not Roger Moore doing the sequences. So that's what's kind of sad about this film, you know. But now we're on to number 23. Number 23 is going to be The World Is Not Enough. Let me give a drink of my beer real quick. Another Pierce Brosnan film, The World Is Not Enough. And this is one for me that I never found this one that interesting. And this is the one where we get to see Pierce Brosnan kind of do that dance and like kind of like a lot of storyline stuff with this character named Electra in this film. I think our Renard is our main villain, and I like the like presence of Renard sometimes, and like the whole theme and story behind him about how he has like the bullet in his head, and it's kind of going more into his brain, and he can't feel pain, and he's getting stronger, and like his nerves, like you know, he's just it's kind of a cool concept. But I just don't like this film. Like I said, this is a very like one that I just find is not interesting to me. It's a very long film too. I think this one's like 2 hours and 45 minutes, which like a lot of Bond films are long, but this one I can really feel the length as I'm watching this Bond film. And as I said, I think you could shave like a good 20 minutes off of this film and you'd be gravy. But all those scenes with Pierce Brosnan dealing with Electra and all that stuff, I'm not fond of any of those moments. Like it's just, and Denise Richards is in this one too, and I don't find her believable as her character. Like she's good in other films, like Wild Things is an amazing movie, but like this kind of movie, like World Is Not Enough, I just wasn't down for. The main song, the title song is pretty cool. It's by a band named Garbage, so I'm cool with the main title song, but it's still not one that I remember. So that's what kind of sucks about World Is Not Enough is like there's just nothing really memorable about this film, and that's why it just sits here at this kind of low bottom of the barrel for me. Now we're on to number 22. And number 22, this one is going to be like starting from here on up are all the ones that I really do enjoy. Like I'll return to them. I find a fond love for them. They're just other Bond films that might be higher up on the list or something like that. Or just like I said, ones that, you know, have weaker plot points or weaker villains. But I do like all these other ones from here on up. The ones below that, I could kind of do without them. But number 22 is going to be Octopussy. And this one is a really fun ride for Roger Moore. I think you can kind of tell that he's just having fun with the role at this time in his life, you know, when he's doing this one. And this one's pretty cool. It's got like this cool storyline about, you know, 009 getting assassinated and like the Fabergé egg and like the traveling circus, you know, and stuff like that. Maud Adams is in this film playing Octopussy. So it's got a lot of cool iconic moments in this film, but it's all kind of played for camp and silliness, which is not bad. Like I said, I could enjoy this film, but I'm much more into serious Bond and much more real world grounded stuff. And this one's kind of like out there, kind of wild. You know, we got some cool like villains. Like there's I forgot what his name is, Kabindi. No, Kabinda, the great menacing henchman. Like he was great. Like there's some cool moments, like I said, and really campy stuff in this film, and I enjoy watching Roger Moore tackle the stuff in it. And like I said, the egg scene when they're like when he switches the eggs, and then we don't know what's the real one and where's the fake one. Like it's just really interesting. But it's kind of one of those plots that if you're not paying attention too much to this one, you're gonna get lost, which is kind of, sucky, because it's like not that great of a movie, but you really do have to pay attention to this one and stuff. But I think Octopussy does kind of get a bad rap sometimes. I see it at like a really low, like number 25 or 24, and like 22 is not that much higher, but like I said, I could still watch this one and have a fun time with it. Now let's move on to number 21. I have my notes here. Like I said, I watched these movies over the last couple months and been binging them, so I took notes over that time and everything. So number 21 for me, this is going to be a really fun one, because number 21 is kind of a fan favorite. I've seen people put this one really high up, and this was a cool one because if you're a Star Wars fan or you're into science fiction, this is probably the most comfortable Bond film for you to watch, and that's Moonraker, because the production company, everybody saw all the stuff that was going on with like Star Trek and Star Wars, excuse me, that like they definitely wanted to implement that into the James Bond world. So that was kind of cool to see that. This was actually Bernard Lee's last performance too in a Bond film as M. So that was kind of cool to see him and Roger Moore. It was like a nice little send off. Bernard Lee has been around as M for a really long time. So this was a cool one. Like, just Moonraker is a really special one for that reason. It's got very elaborate set pieces. That's what I have written here, huge letters. It has so many cool elaborate set pieces. You could tell the production design people, they really went out of their way to make this one look fabulous. And it does shred far away from the source material. Like, the book is completely different from the movie, but it's kind of cool because when this one, like I said, when you see it, it's like that one in a lifetime type Bond film. It's not going to be everybody's taste, but you can definitely enjoy this one because, like I said, it's got a really cool sci-fi stuff in it. I think Hugo Drax is a very underrated villain. He's played by Michael Lonsdale, and he has a lot of good lines in this movie. And like I said, I think he's a very underrated villain throughout like the James Bond universe. He's like, he does have a lot of menacing lines, but Jaws is also in this movie. We see him return for the second time as a henchman, and I think he's a little overused in this movie. I do enjoy him, but I like him better in The Spy Who Loved Me. In this one, I'm just not really down for him. Like I said, I think he's used a little bit too much in this film. So, and also the fake funeral, like gondola scene thing, that I have that written down too. That was kind of amazing. Like, that scene was really fun. Like, there's some just cool moments in Moonraker, and like I wish it was higher up on the list, but there's just so many other Bond films, and that's why it's kind of sitting here at number 21. Now we're on to number 20, and this is going to be Tomorrow Never Dies. Pierce Brosnan again showing up. Like I said, I'm not the hugest Pierce Brosnan fan, so he sits here like a lot of his very low. You're going to find one of his really high up on my list, but here we have Tomorrow Never Dies. Sheryl Crow doing the title song, which I think is just not that great. Like, this one has one of the weakest title songs, I think. It's very not memorable at all. I think this one has some good action in it, but it's almost like two different movies. So we have the beginning part of the movie, which is where we kind of meet Bond and him dealing with Elliot Carver, I believe is the villain's name, and we find out that Terry Hatcher, his ex-wife, is dating the main villain of the movie. And we go through this kind of thing, this play back and forth of like, oh, Bond notices her, and like she notices him, and like, it's just not this, like, I don't like any of that. I really wish that whole ex-wife storyline with Terry Hatcher's character was just taken out of this movie. Once we get to Pierce Brosnan with Michelle Yeoh, that is genius. I love all that stuff when he's teaming up with her, the action sequences when they're handcuffed together and they're on the bike and he's driving and she has to maneuver around him while they're getting shot at. Like, this just, all that stuff is good. So that's why it's kind of like two different movies. The first half is like complete garbage for me, and then once we get into the second half of the movie, I'm like, all right, let's go. That's why this one kind of beats out some of the other films on this list for like the Pierce Brosnan ones and stuff like that. And for like Moonraker, I like this one a little bit better than that because this one's a little bit more grounded in the real world. Like Moonraker, when we get to that ending sequence and you see like the guys in space fighting with the lasers and they're all shooting lasers at each other, the same colors, like it kind of looks like almost a Galaga type ending sequence, And Tomorrow Never Dies is a much more grounded, real world type Bond film, and that's why it beats it out just a little bit. Now we're on to number 19. We are making our way through this list like pretty quick. Number 19. Oh, did anybody else share in the comments? My bad. Let's see. Let's check the comments just in case. Pierce Brosnan, yeah. Quantum of Solace isn't going to be number 19. This was Daniel Craig's second Bond film, and Quantum of Solace has one of the best opening scenes in any 007 movie ever. Like that car chase scene in the beginning of this movie, I've watched that scene over and over and over, like a bunch of times, more than I've actually watched the entire movie all the way through, because that opening scene, it's so freaking good. And that's the only scene where I feel like the editing for this movie works, is in that car scene when when Daniel Craig's maneuvering through and he has Mr. White in the trunk. Like all that stuff is amazing. But the rest of the movie, the way the fighting is hand to hand and the way it's edited, it's much more similar to a Jason Bourne type film. And that's where I think that falls flat a little bit. You know what I mean? Plus, Quantum of Solace probably has one of the weakest villains that we've ever had in a James Bond film, Mr. Green. Like, he wasn't even good enough to be put on the wall in Spectre when Blofeld is like showing Daniel Craig all the people in his past. Like, he's not even up there. Mr. Green, that's how like shitty like he was as a villain. So, and his plot to like take over the 90% of the water source of this one country so they can get all the votes to do this. It's a very weak kind of villain plot, and that's why it's not that interesting. Olga Kurlenko is kind of cool though. She's the Bond woman in this film. She was actually in the Hitman movie, the very first Hitman rendition that they did for the game and turned it into a movie. She was in that movie. She does okay in this film. Like her and Daniel Craig, they have some good chemistry and stuff like that, but I think this one just falls flat because it doesn't have the same punch or oomph that a lot of the other Daniel Craig films have. Now we're on to number 18. We were breezing through this. I'm going to take a drink real quick. Got 5 likes on the stream already, yo. The Man with the Golden Gun is going to be coming in at number 18. And this was actually a fun revisit for me. One of my friends on my Discord, this is one of his favorite Bond films. And I was eager to return to this one because this one was actually kind of lower on my list when I first kind of made my list before I returned to them. I had this one pretty low, but returning to it, it climbed up a little bit. Definitely the highlight of this film, we have to talk about Scaramanga, played by Christopher Lee. That was amazing with his henchman, Knick Knack. There too, they just steal the show in this movie. Like, that's what's kind of key and I think funny about Roger Moore's is like Roger Moore's films, he's got a lot of great villains, a lot of cool storylines and elaborate set pieces around him. I just don't find Roger Moore's Bond that entertaining or that amazing. Like, I don't believe him as James Bond, but the stories around him are really good. Like, even The Man with the Golden Gun, like, even though it's a small scale type story, excuse me, beer, even though it's a small scale type story, I still really enjoy this film. Like, it's just him hunting down like a great assassin who uses a golden gun with like these special golden bullets made from like, with the special marking, and he shoots them like, oh, it's just really cool. Very fun, interesting ride. I just think when we get into that third act of this film, it does kind of fall flat. It has a weak kind of ending to me. Mary Goodnight, played by Britt Eklund, isn't one of my favorite Bond girls. Like, and the way that Roger Moore is portrayed in this film and most of his career, I think the writers went a long way in making Roger Moore the most misogynistic and the most mean, just on purpose, because like, I don't know, that we wouldn't believe him in that role or something like that. And like, I don't know, his comedy lines for me don't always land. But like all those scenes, like when he's talking to Mary Goodnight in this movie at like that third act, like he's just a complete asshole. Like, so like, I don't know, like there's just certain things that bother me about Roger Moore's performance as Bond. And like, that's not just him, as an actor, that's the writing sometimes and stuff like that. But I still did have a really good time with The Man with the Golden Gun. Like I said, it climbed up my list a few spots. Now we're on to number 17. This is going to be kind of like the Roger Moore kind of bunching of groups because I got three here and they're all Roger Moore films. So like that's like the middle ground for me. So number 17 is going to be For Your Eyes Only, which is widely regarded as probably Roger Moore's best. A lot of people think this is his best one, For Your Eyes Only, and it's definitely a solid Bond film. I can watch this one, return to it, have a good time with it. You know, I mean, it's just this one, it's the first one actually too. I have written down here. It's actually the first one too, where they actually tried to connect the Bonds and mention on Her Majesty's Secret Service that he had a wife, and Roger Moore has a conversation with the woman at the bar about it. Like, so this is the first one where they acknowledge that. So we're at this point as a viewer and like fans, we're supposed to know that Sean Connery, George Lazenby, Roger Moore, they've all been the same person. It's not different people. They're all one James Bond. So it's one timeline. But I think the villain in this one, Aristotle, the smuggler that's hired by the KGB to steal that special weapon, like the Polaris, I believe it's called in this one. Like, oh man, it's just a very weak one for me. Like, and I just don't like that storyline. I think he's a weak villain, especially after we see the end of Blofeld in the beginning of this movie. So it's kind of like I wanted a little more from that revenge of him getting revenge for Tracy's death. You know, Tracy Bond is James Bond's only like wife that we've known at this point. So I wanted more from that first opening scene when he kills Blofeld. You're like, you just murdered the guy. You just killed the guy who murdered my wife. And they play it off for laughs, where he kind of like Roger Moore reaches out of the helicopter and pats Blofeld on the head and then dumps him down. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's and dumps him off the helicopter. Like it's just played for laughs. So I don't really enjoy it that much, you know? Oh, man, but we do have an amazing opening song I have written here by Sheena Easton. Oh, the opening song is a banger for sure. I do like that. Now we're on to number 16, and that's going to be Live and Let Die, Roger Moore's debut film. I think this is a very strong debut film for sure. I think Roger Moore in this one was before it went too campy, before it went too silly. Like Roger Moore actually played it for seriousness in this film. He doesn't actually get a lot of action stuff to do in this movie until about an hour into the movie. So it's kind of like not a powerful like epic introduction to James Bond or anything like that, because a lot of the other James Bonds, like their first time you ever see them, they're jumping out of a plane or they're shooting someone or they're diving off skiing or some crap, like, you know. But this one, it's just Bond hanging out, you know, sleeping with a woman. He just turns over and gets his little message in his watch of like his next mission that he's being, you know, summoned by M. So like it's just kind of a simple walk in as, oh, I'm the new James Bond. Here I am, Roger Moore. But I think this one is kind of cool because we get Coral Jr.'s son in this, who was the son of Coral Sr., Coral Jr. from Doctor No. It was a previous Bond film. He ended up helping Sean Connery. The father is in that film, and he helps Sean Connery. So I think that's really cool. I love the voodoo aesthetic in this film. And the villain plot is very kind of a simple one, you know, about drugs and like, you know, cocaine and stuff like that. And it's just a very simple one. But I love the voodoo aesthetic in this one. We have Yaphet Kotto, who plays Mr. Big Kananga. That's our main villain, and I think he does a very good job. Like, you know, as I said, even though it's a very simple plot, I love the aesthetic of this film. I don't really have a problem that they went with a full villain cast of all African American actors. Like, I think it's kind of cool. Like, it's all the Bond films kind of have their own genre, their own feel, and over the decades they've done different things to accompany different, you know, walks of life in all their films. And I think it's really cool. Like, you know, all like it's just a world full of gangsters, voodoo, and drugs. Like, and it's cool to see Roger Moore's Bond get thrusted into that world. It's very interesting. We also have Jane Seymour playing Solitaire. You know, Jane Seymour, it grows up to be an amazing, famous actress, and like a lot of these actresses do as Bond girls. But I think it's really cool to see a very young Jane Seymour as Solitaire in this film too. How far are we? 24 minutes. We've only been like 24 minutes. 5 likes still, man. Yeah. No dislikes. No.
You judge the viewers?
No, I don't even think you can see the dislike thing anymore. I think they actually took it off. Or you can like take it off eventually, but We are here now with number 15, on to 15, and this might be a little criminal putting this one this low. Maybe a little scandalous, controversial, so watch out. I do adore this film, I really do, but this is much more of an appreciation than it is like a love for this film, and that's Dr. No, the very first James Bond film starring Sean Connery, introducing us to 007 himself for the very first time. Dr. No, as I said, is still a good James Bond film. It laid down the template for everything we know James Bond to be today. But with Dr. No, like I said, it's much more of an appreciation love for it than it is like I adore it, I watch it. Like, I don't rewatch this one a lot, but when I catch it on TV or I'm binging, I always enjoy getting to this one. Like, I don't hate it, like I said, I just don't find myself rewatching this one on TV a lot or streaming it or anything like that. Excuse me. But I do like Joseph Wiseman as Julius No. He's very, I think, underrated as a Bond villain. I think it's because he was the very first one that after we see so many other Bond film villains come after that, you kind of forget about him, and that's what kind of sucks. I like Ursula Andress as Honey Rider. Honey Rider is probably one of my favorite Bond girl names. Like, I think that's just a really cool name, Honey Rider. It sounds like a badass, like, special agent type thing, and she's not like a badass special agent, but she ends up helping Sean Connery, and she's gorgeous in this film. And it's just cool to see, like I said, Sean Connery lay down the template, as I said, for a lot of the stuff we know later. And before he even gets his gadgets, he does the really cool things, like how he pulls out a piece of his hair and licks his thumbs and puts it on the door so he knows if someone opened the door. He puts, like powder on the end of his briefcase so he knows if someone flipped the lock open. Like, very simple things that you see done before, he gets his gadgets and all that stuff. So I do like Dr. No. Like I said, it's just much more of an appreciation type love than it is I really do love it. Now we're on to number 14. Enter in Timothy Dalton, Living Daylights. His first film. This is Timothy Dalton's first film, and I think it packs a punch. It really does. Timothy Dalton is probably one of the first most very aggressive Bonds. George Lazenby was the first one who kind of laid that template down, but he only did one Bond film. But he did lay down the template for a more physical Bond that actually did his own stunts. And Timothy Dalton really lived that to the T. And like I said, he does get some really good badass Bond movies. Probably some of the most graphic and most brutal Bond movies that Timothy Dalton, he gets those ones. And, he's rough and rugged, and that's why I like him. One of my favorite scenes in this one is when he's Bond and Kara are on the cello, and they're going down the ice getting shot at, and he's like in the cello, like they're using a cello case for an instrument, sliding down ice, shooting at villains. Like, what the hell? Like, only James Bond can do something like that. You know what I mean? So it's just, in terms of this movie, why it's this kind of lower on the list is the music and the look of the film, the way that the film looks, the grading of the film, the size of the screen, and just the music. It kind of comes off a little bit TV filmish. It does to me. It comes off a little TV film status. And that's what kind of bothers me. I really don't like the score to this movie or like the title track. Like, it wasn't something that I remember. It's not a memorable one either. And I think Joe Don Baker as Brad Whitaker is a very weak, lackluster villain. Like, come on, let's be realistic. Like, his dialogue, his presence, all the stuff in this film, like when he's delivering it, it just doesn't pack that punch for me. And that's why, oh man, I just wish it was higher. I do adore Art Malik. I have this written down. I have to bring him up. I love him in this film. Art Malik in here as Kamarn Shah. Like, oh man, he's the helper for 007 in this film. Like, one of the assistants. Like, it's great to see him, like, just what he does. Like, and he's riding that horse, shooting that machine gun with his turban and everything. Like, and they're like, he has all the warriors with him. Like, it's really cool. That kind of scenery, those moments, I really do adore about this film. Now we're on to our next one, number 13. This one made the highest jump on my list. This film I used to have at like number 21, and now it's here at number 13, and that's On Her Majesty's Secret Service. This one, after returning to this one, seeing George Lazenby, I've found a new appreciation for him. Being, like I said, he really did lay the template down for that early Daniel Craig, Timothy Dalton James Bond, the more physical, the one that gets roughed up, the one that gets rugged, that does his own stunts. George Lazenby in this one, like, really brought it. And I know it's kind of a lot different that people. Do you have a question?
Yes.
Oh, she has a question. Sorry, we have a question.
Why did it go from like 21 to 13? How did it get to
Oh,
13?
why? Why did it go? Because, like, when I first watched this film, when I first appeared, like, came to this film, I just, with George Lazenby only doing one Bond film, and it just was so different for me not to be used to him. It's not Roger Moore, it's not Sean Connery, and the fact that it's a film where we watch Bond fall in love with someone. Tracy Bond, he ends up having a wife, he gets married in this film, and it has a different pace than all the other Bond films that we've seen before this. So when I saw it at a young age, I was just not into it. Returning to it as a teen, I never got into it. I just kind of maybe had that thing where, oh, I hate this film. I kind of stuck it with that. I'm like, I don't like this film. And after returning to this one, oh, it's just a blast. I have a new appreciation for Tracy Bond, the storyline, even though it does have kind of a weird pace because he meets Tracy first. Then he goes on his mission to the Swiss Alps to deal with Blofeld and his germ warfare, like his crazy germ warfare, like storyline. Like, oh, it's pretty cool. But it just is sad. Like, it's just so powerful, that ending scene too. Like, when you see him, like, and they drive by, you think Blofeld's, like, you never hear from him. Like, you see him, and then they get married and they're going off and, like, doing the ceremony, when you drive in the car, and then they do a drive-by shooting and Tracy gets shot in the head, and it's like, damn. Like, Bond doesn't even get a chance at happiness. And like I said, the only other time, I think it was, like I said, for Your Eyes Only, where they actually brought this up and connected the storylines. But damn, like, for real, returning to this one, I had a blast with On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And some people don't like this one still to this day because the ski scenes are kind of like really old school. They don't age that well. They don't like George Lazenby because they think he's very wooden in his delivery. But I think he has a certain swagger about him. He's very comfortable in the role. He does this little fourth wall breaking, like, line too, where he, like, looks at the line and he's like, they didn't do that in the other movie. Like, like, referencing, like, as if there's other Bond movies like they've seen him made. Like, they do this, like, fourth wall dimensional breaking thing. So it's kind of cool. Like I said, it just really was a new passionate love that I found for this one, returning to it. Now we're on to number 12. Back to my boy, Sean Connery. I'm going to take a drink before I tell you which one it is, though. Number 12. You Only Live Twice. Sean Connery in Japan. Oh, man. I think this one's really cool, too, because we start off with James Bond dying in the beginning of the movie. Faking his own death. Like, come on. Like, that is amazing stuff right there. And for me, this has always been one that I've enjoyed. Plus, it has a high-stakes plot. This is actually the first James Bond film where we get that plot of our main villain trying to cause war, nuclear war between, like, the Eastern and Western countries, you know what I mean? Framing them, making, like, everything tense. It's got this real cool kind of, like, doomsday clock type vibe to it. And the fact that we get to see James Bond tackle this mission in Japan, I do have like a fond love for Japan. I love Japanese anime and all that kind of stuff. So to see Bond over there in that aesthetic, see the sumo wrestlers and all the kimonos and everything like that, it's really cool to see that stuff. We actually get an appearance by Charles Gray in this film too, who ends up later playing Blofeld in a later Bond film, which I think is kind of funny. Like, there's a lot of actors and actresses that have been in Bond films multiple times, playing different characters, so I find that kind of fascinating. We also get Nancy Sinatra singing the title song for this movie, so, like, how can you not hate on that, bro? Like, you can't. Nancy Sinatra that's choice. She's got such a beautiful voice. Then we have the legend, Dr. Loomis. Donald Pleasance himself is in this playing Blofeld. Like, that's an amazing thing too. Like, Donald Pleasance is the bomb. Like, I love him because I love the Halloween franchise. Dr. Loomis, like, he's one of my favorite characters in the Halloween franchise. And to see Donald Pleasance playing Blofeld, even though he's not in this movie for that long, he doesn't really show up until about an hour and 2 minutes into this movie. But I still have a blast with You Only Live Twice. Like I said, I return to this one a lot. Aki, like I get so sad when I see her die, like the teammate of Sean Connery. I wish he had a more of an emotional response to her when he finds out that she's dead. But like, oh man, I was so sad when I found out that Aki died. I was like, damn, like she was one of the best. Like I thought she was kind of cool, witty. She played games with Bond, and he didn't know like, oh, maybe like was she messing with me? But she was a cool character for sure. All right, now we're on to number 11, correct? Yeah, we just finished 12, didn't we? Sorry, my notes are all jumbled. Yes, we just finished 12. Forgot to talk about some of the directors too. Let's get into that. We didn't talk about some of the directors. We've had a lot of similar directors come into these films. Like John Glenn did A View to a Kill. He also did Octopussy and For Your Eyes Only. So we have a lot of similar directors coming in to do these films. So being Bond, if you're a Bond fan, you could kind of have a love for certain directors too, and that might influence where the films land on your list and stuff like that. We also have Guy Hamilton, who did Man with the Golden Gun. Guy Hamilton did a few other ones too that are a lot higher up on my list, like Goldfinger and Diamonds Are Forever. But oh man, those are some of the great directors that have touched the Bond franchise. But now, like I said, we're on to number 11, almost to the top 10, baby. This one might be a little controversial, putting this one this high, but after seeing No Time to Die, the most recent James Bond film that just came out this year, this film got elevated so much. When you really think of Daniel Craig's catalog as a whole, it fucking just No Time to Die just raised the bar. It took all of his movies and just raised it because Daniel Craig is the first one where they really went full blown, like creating one arc for a James Bond actor where they kind of reboot it with Casino Royale and ended it in No Time to Die and kind of did this thing. So, oh man, here we are. Spectre is here at number 11. And I know, like I said, this might be a controversial pick. This isn't a popular one, but don't be surprised why. I'm going to tell you why this is a good film. This film has everything that you want in a James Bond film and like movie. It looks amazing. We have a slam dunk cast like Christoph Waltz, Leah Sado, Dave Bautista. Like we have a slam dunk cast. The amazing, stunning Monica Bellucci. Like oh my God, Daniel Craig as James Bond. So this one, like I said, has everything you really want. It does look beautiful. We have Sam Mendes at the helm of this film as a director, who I think is one of the best directors to touch a James Bond film. And you can tell when you watch this film, it has like amazing production value. The cinematography, it looks beautiful. There's a lot of callbacks to other James Bond films. And like, oh man, it's just, for me, Daniel Craig knocks it out of the park in this one. Like once after his first films, like Daniel Craig just got better and better, more comfortable in the role as James Bond. And by the time we get to Spectre, it's just full blown. He is very comfortable being this character. He is definitely James Bond. Christoph Waltz might be the weakest of the Blofelds that we've had. That's probably my main problem with this film is Christoph Waltz is a banging actor. He does some amazing stuff in Glorious Bastards with Quentin Tarantino, like that's Django Unchained. He's been in some really good movies, delivered some really good performances. So when you see him in this, he's a very different character than he's used to playing. Blofeld, he's very laid back. He's very chill, very calm in this one. And I think he just gets a bad rap because of the way he plays the character and stuff like that. And I think, yes, he is probably the weakest of the Blofelds. But the reason it is this high, like I said, is Spectre does have everything you really want in it. It has really good like action. It's just the problem that people have with this film I see, and I can see and understand their problem, is that we've seen everything in this film done before and done better. And that's what I said might be the problem, is that, like I said, everybody's seen this and it's been done better. So that's probably the main problem. But I still do enjoy this film, Spectre. And as I said, mainly the torture scene is also like a good example of this film. Like if I was to explain it real quick, the torture scene with him and Christoph Waltz, and he has Daniel Craig in the chair, and it's that all white room, and he's about to drill into his skull. That whole room, the aesthetic is amazing. It looks beautiful. The setup is cool, but it's so drawn out that the tension just kind of deflates like a whoopee cushion. It just deflates out, and it's all gone. So by the time you get to that ending scene, or not the ending scene, but you get to that scene when you see the watch fall and and it blows up in his face, you just don't feel it like you should because the tension's all gone from the scene. But Spectre is still really good, but really close. Fell out of that top 10. But we are here now to the top 10. What's up?
I was gonna say number 9. I
No,
thought
no,
you
I'm
said
not. Yeah, we're here
that.
at the top 10, baby. Before we get to the top 10, if you haven't yet, though, drop a like, get some likes on there, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing. And I'm going to get another drink, sip of this beer. Here we are, slamming it down hard. At number 10 is going to be License to Kill. Timothy Dalton's second run as James Bond. Easily, this is the most graphic, most brutal James Bond film that you'll ever see. This one is dark for sure. Like, this one actually kind of makes me feel a little uncomfortable. Like, not like the fact that I can't watch it, but that I'm actually with Timothy Dalton hardcore in this one when he goes rogue as James Bond and goes after the villain because he killed Felix Leiter's wife and had a shark eat Felix's leg. Like, this freaking movie goes places, bro. And like Robert Davi is the villain in this one with his iguana that has a diamond necklace. Like, who cannot hate on a freaking Bond villain? Like, I mean, I hate him because he fucking went at Felix like that. I hate him because of that reason. But he has an iguana with a diamond necklace. Benicio del Toro's in this movie too. We also have Talisa Soto in this movie, who played Elektra in Mortal Kombat from 1995 or 96. So there's a lot of cool actors and actresses in this movie. And this one is just a banger. Like, it's action packed from beginning to end. And as I said, we are emotionally invested as we follow Timothy Dalton's character, whereas he plays James Bond, going for revenge for his friend Felix and goes rogue. So that's what's kind of really cool about this one is Timothy Dalton was the first Bond I think to really show character growth. All the other Bonds before this were like Connery, Moore, and Lazenby were a lot more one note. It's like we're gonna play Bond this way. It's the template. You know, he's a misogynist. He's only down to do the mission. He's doing this. Like, that's how we're playing him. Timothy Dalton was the first one that actually had character growth in his films. Excuse me, burp a lot when I drink my beer. But oh man, like I said, License to Kill is one of my favorites. I love returning to this one. It just goes hard for sure. Like I said, that amazing cast. We even have Wayne Newton in this movie. Like, come on, Wayne Newton. What? What can you not hate? Now, next up, one that's near and dear to my heart. This is the first James Bond film that my mom ever showed me. I was about 9 years old when I saw this movie. First ever James Bond film. Introduced to Sean Connery as she sat me down in her room and showed me Diamonds Are Forever. I believe it was on like AMC or like BBC or something like that. But this is the first film that I ever got introduced to by as James Bond, the franchise. This is the one that really got me into loving spy films and like wanting to, see all those crazy villainous characters and all the adventures that James Bond would get on. And Sean Connery just captured that role for me perfectly. Like, I just loved it. Diamonds Are Forever. I always return to this one just because it might be heavy nostalgia, but I do love the storyline, especially because it's one that does take place in America, and that's not too often. Like, we do get Bond. I love seeing all those crazy locations like Rio de Janeiro or Egypt or Antarctica or the Swiss Alps, but I like seeing ones in America too. And this one mostly takes place in Vegas. I like Jill St. John as Tiffany Case. I think she's one of the most underrated Bond girls. I think she's beautiful, like probably the most gorgeous Bond girl. Like, she is amazing, very beautiful. Charles Gray as Blofeld. Here he is right here in this film, and he was in You Only Live Twice as a different character helping helping Sean Connery, and now he's a villain. So, and this is actually Sean Connery's last Bond film, if you don't count Never Say Never Again. He did Never Say Never Again after this, but if you're only counting the Eon production films, this is his last James Bond film. So I always have a heavy nostalgia in my heart too watching this one, because this is kind of Sean Connery's send off. I really don't think he's too old in this film. Some people say that he's like too old in this one, but I don't think he is. I just think this one, there's very quick, witty dialogue. And Diamonds Are Forever. The writing is really good. I have that written down. I love the writing. I think there's a killer title track for sure. I love the title track. And oh, we have to talk about Mr. Kid and Mr. Winked. How this is probably amazing that we have villains in the James Bond universe, these two quirky assassins, and they're a couple. And I find that amazing that we have, lesbian couples and gay, or we have lesbians or gay couples in James Bond, and that happens so prominent early in decades, way back in the day when, like, it was kind of like frowned upon for most films to do that. And James Bond, like the 007 franchise, they really took, the leap and were including them in movies way before other people were. So that's what I really do love about this film too, as well. There's just so many quirky characters. The scene where Plenty O'Toole, the Bond girl, the other one, Plenty O'Toole, gets tossed out of the window, and the gangster throws her out of the window, and then he looks down, like, and James Bond sees, like, she lands in the pool, and he's like, "Oh, like, nice shot," or whatever I think is his line, and then the gangster looks down, and he's like, "I didn't even know there was a pool down there." Like, it's just it's a line that gets a freaking chuckle out of you, but it's like, damn, like, this, he literally threw this chick out of the window thinking that she was gonna just die. So, like, there's just there's funny moments, and I think Sean Connery, you can tell, like, especially in Diamonds Are Forever, when he delivers certain lines, he's just money. Like, for me, compared to some of the other Bond actors, where their lines don't come off as funny, or they come off ruder or more misogynistic, I find Sean Connery is to be just more suave, more debonair. I feel like he even makes me blush or something, you know what I mean, when he's saying the lines to women. That's how amazing Sean Connery is at delivering the lines in his movies. Right, here we go. Here we go. Number 8. Oh, we have to bust out. Here she is, baby. The Golden Girl. Right here. So, number 8, as you can tell, since we busted out the Golden Girl, number 8 is going to be Goldfinger. Probably the most popular, most known James Bond film. This is the most talked about one, the one that people know about. Even if you aren't a fond fan of the Bond franchise or a Bond fandom person, you're going to know Goldfinger. You've either heard a quote from it, or you've seen the villain from it, or you've seen, the Golden Girl from it. There's some form or fashion you've been introduced to this film. And I think in that regard, Goldfinger is a little bit overrated. Like I said, it's not in my top 5. It's a little bit overrated. I've seen most people's list, and it's usually in that top 5 range. But I do like Sean Connery in this film, of course. Goldfinger, like, he's my favorite James Bond, so I love seeing him in this film. The scenes that he has with Auric Goldfinger, and I think Auric is probably the villain that we get throughout most of the James Bond film. He's the one that we get the most out of all the franchise villains. I think he's the one that's in the Bond films the most. Where, like, in him and Odd Job, the henchman, I think they just get a lot of time, like, on screen. Even a lot of stuff doing with James Bond. We don't get introduced to Pussy Galore till way far into the movie, our femme fatale, and she's really good with, like, the women that do the stunt plane, stuff and everything. And I just find Oryx kind of his, like, Grand Slam, Operation Grand Slam. I find that kind of stupid. Like, I don't really think the villain plot is that amazing, but I like the moments in this film. So many iconic scenes and lines, especially like the scene when James Bond's strapped to the chair and the lasers going up the table, about to cut, into his groin. Like, oh man, like, it's like just so many moments in this film that are memorable. Odd Job being the henchman with the hat, and he throws the hat, and it, like, it has the razor blades on the end. I turn my hat backwards, actually, now that I thought of it. But oh man, Goldfinger, like I said, I think it is a little overrated, but it's definitely still a banger of a film. I absolutely love the golf sequence. That's my favorite, probably, sequence between Bond and Goldfinger, is that golf sequence. Just them playing, like, the putt. Like, I love all that stuff. It's just gold. It's money, as you would say. But now we're on to number 7. because I said we're gonna crack through this. We're getting to almost an hour in, like not too far. We might be able to get this done in an hour. So number 7, unequivocally, I think this is the best of Roger Moore's James Bond films. And you know what we have left? The Spy Who Loved Me. Oh man, I think this is Roger Moore in his best performance. This is the one that I think the scenery, the places we go, like Egypt and like to the different areas, the introduction of Jaws. This is the first time we see Jaws as a henchman in this movie, and he is absolutely freaking menacing. Like just oh, he's so scary in this movie, like an actual scary freaking henchman. That's what's cool about Jaws in this movie, which I think in the other film that he was in, he was a little overused. But I think Roger Moore, paired with some epic, huge action sequences, an absolute banger of a cast, and Nobody Does It Better by Carly Simon. Oh, that's our title song. This one, for real, Spy Who Loved Me is just, it's out there. Has everything you want. Like for me, this is like a 10 out of 10 film, man, almost. Like this is like a 9 or a 10. It's such a fucking good movie, dude. And oh, Agent Triple X, I love her too. I have that written down. I love Agent Triple X. To see Bond have to team up with an Eastern agent, like it's just really cool to see that aspect of the film. Like because they're playing on that whole like Russian like British thing, like and they're like, do we trust him? Do I trust her? Like kind of thing. And I think she does a good job. She doesn't get a lot of action stuff in this movie compared to like his teammate in Moonraker. So that's kind of a thing that you don't get a lot of stuff like that. But I still do really love Spy Who Loved Me. I think by far Roger Moore slammed it hard down in this film. I think this is the one when he was most comfortable as James Bond. And absolutely, this is the one I return to the most out of his catalog of James Bond movies. And like, oh, and Nobody Does It Better by Carly Simon is such a good freaking song. Like, for real, bro. It's so fucking good. Now we're on to number 6, baby. Number 6. Back to my boy Sean Connery, From Russia with Love. And this is a lot of people's number 1. And this is my number 6, man. But From Russia with Love is kind of that template for a spy film. It's got a good pace to it. It's slow, but it's got a good pace to it that builds tension. And I feel it throughout this whole entire movie. And I think this is the one where you can really see Sean Connery as his most suave, his most debonair, his most cunning is in this film. And I think, oh man, like there's great spy drama at the core of this film. The Bond formula is in true fashion in this film. Robert Shaw as Red Grant is a really good side villain henchman. The scenes on the train when he's traveling and he gets Bond into the train and like he's sitting there talking to him, like just all his scenes, Robert Shaw, he's money. He's got really good dialogue and a really good delivery in this movie. Such a presence. And then we have Daniela Bianca as Tatiana Romanoff, the beautiful, elegant. She plays a great role, perfect in the film. Like she's great, perfect in the film. And not to mention we have Rosa Klebb as our other Bond like sub villain. Like oh man, it's just really cool. The only thing is we have like a kind of a main kind of villain, Kucherov, I think is his name, and he gets kind of put to the side. And I think he's like a freaking, he's just kind of useless. I mean, it's kind of fun maybe to see that Klebb is more important, more reliable than him. Like we see that scene where she gets chosen over him as like, oh, for the mission. Cause like the guy's like, oh no, your plot sounds dumb. And this is all kind of a revenge plot story to get back after Dr. No for the death of him. And we actually get our first Q scene in this movie too. It's not a traditional Bond Q scene where they meet each other, but we get Bond, Q coming to Bond in M's office, delivering some kind of gadgets and stuff like that. So that's really cool. And as I said, From Russia with Love, it's just a blast. I really do like this film. It's got a pretty good title sequence song too. Like, this is the first one where they really kind of started that kind of thing. And it has an intro sequence, but it doesn't have Bond in it. Which is kind of funny because those like intro scenes for a while there, they had nothing to do with like the plot of the actual film, or sometimes didn't even have James Bond in it. So that was kind of weird. But now we're on to my number 5, baby. Oh, yeah. Let me see if I got my notes. Yeah. My number 5, and that's going to be GoldenEye. Bringing it home, starting it off in the top 5. Pierce Brosnan. I absolutely think this is Pierce Brosnan's best film This first one just slammed down hard, man. And this is directed by Martin Campbell, who successfully launched the careers of Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig as James Bond because he directed Casino Royale. So he's just a great director. He's a good, solid James Bond director, and you can see that implemented in the way he executes this film. And I think, oh man, Pierce Brosnan, Femke Jensen in this film, like all the side characters in this movie, Sean Bean as 006, like oh, this one is just, plus GoldenEye, oh, you have to talk about it. If you're going to talk about GoldenEye, the movie, you have to talk about the Nintendo 64 game GoldenEye. So that's what really propelled this one into the stratosphere of being very popular, is that it has a movie that's amazing, Pierce Brosnan, a banger, and as I said, the game came out. So that's what's amazing about GoldenEye, really. Pierce is a killer name for Bond. Yeah, that would be, yeah, Pierce is a killer name for Bond, huh? Like, it's just, oh, that's what I loved about GoldenEye is that when I first saw this one, that's why I thought Pierce Brosnan, I was like, damn, we're on for a ride. We are going some good places with this, with the Bond franchise now. But then as Pierce Brosnan's kept going, like Tomorrow Never Dies was a little bit less good. World Is Not Enough was kind of really crappy, and then Die Another Day was another one that just fell off for me. So that's what kind of sucked. But I still do really love this first one, GoldenEye, with him. And like I said, Femke Jensen is probably one of the greatest. Is Omnitop, I think is Omnitop is her name. She's probably one of the most brutal femme fatales. Like that scene when she crushes that guy, like breaking his ribs and like crushes him with her legs. Like really cool, epic stuff. Pierce Brosnan driving a tank, in the streets. Like, what's not to love about GoldenEye? There's just so many epic moments. And as you're watching the movie, you realize, like, oh man, I played that, or I saw that in the games, or I played that multiplayer level with my friends. And that's why GoldenEye is so special, too. Now we're here on to number 4. We're almost done. We're almost through, and then maybe we can chill out. And if you guys want to, we'll talk some random stuff if you want, or tell me about some of your favorite Bond moments. But here we are, number 4, No Time to Die, the most recent Bond film. Damn, this film did slam it down hard. As I said, No Time to Die. This last one for Daniel Craig, it really did elevate all of his movies.
Number 1 for me.
That's number 1. Love it. Thanks, bro. This one, it slammed it down hard. And what No Time to Die does is that's when you realize it's a good sequel or a good ending film, is it elevates the films prior to it. It acknowledges them, but builds on them. It doesn't just look at the past and it's like, oh, remember this, remember this. No, it's like, remember this, but we're going to build on everything and make it even better. And that's what No Time to Die does. And like, oh man, to everything from Christoph Waltz's performance in this one to like, oh, like it's just so good. Daniel Craig, those emotional moments that he has with Felix Leiter in this one, played by Jeffrey Wright. That scene actually got me. Like the spoilers ahead, I have to warn you. Spoilers if you haven't seen the movie. I'm gonna warn you right now. We're getting into it. When Jeffrey Wright dies, that moment hit me so hard when he has Felix. Like it's like watching his brother die. You can see it in James Bond. Like it really does bother him seeing Felix like die, and he lets him go in the water, and you see his body go, and I'm just like, damn, man, like this one really does have a lot of stuff going for it. Nomi, Bond girl, like that replaces 007 in this film, like I think she's fabulous in this movie. Like it has some of the best quick witty dialogue. I really think Monty Penny, all of them in this one, like it's cool to see everybody kind of come back in this film, and it's like that nice farewell send off for Daniel Craig. I'm not too fond of the Bond song in this film, and that's actually the one that we got done by Billie Eilish. And I've heard her do better songs. Like my daughter loves her, so I've heard her do better songs. But like I said, that's what kind of bothered me about this one is I really wanted more. I think for it being the last final kind of Daniel Craig one, it needed to be a song that had a much more oomph, more power to it, and I don't feel that. But oh man, Rami Malek is another thing that I love about the film because he's kind of menacing, but in that slow fashion, which I have a problem with him. The first time I watched it, I kind of had a problem with it, where I was like, oh, what's his deal? But then after I talked with my wife about it, and like she kind of I talked to her and explained his storyline, and she kind of made me understand another side of it, and I rewatched the film, and with that viewing in mind and thought about it, and I was like, no, Rami Malek's villain is pretty good in No Time to Die. Plus the tech that he has at his disposal in this movie is god awful freaking scary. Like I think that's by far the villainous tech in this movie is by far the scariest thing that we've ever seen in any James Bond film. Excuse me. Now we're here at the top three, finally. The big dogs for everybody, man. These are my three favorites. These are the ones that I return to the most, the heavy hitters. Pretty much all these top, like from 6 on up or 7 on up, are all like 9s or 10s for me. But these three are the bangers for sure. And number 3 is going to be Casino Royale. Daniel Craig's first outing as James Bond. I think that is an amazing film. Like this first outing as James Bond is so good. That intro scene when you see him get his license to kill, and it's filmed in black and white, and it leads into the title card sequence. And then we have oh, it's just so good. It really is. And Ava Green, yep, there we have it in the chat right there. Ava Green as Vespa. Vespa Lynn, like I know she is kind of like backstabs Bond a little bit as we get to the end of the film. You find out about her, but I think her chemistry with Daniel Craig is probably some of the best that we've ever seen a Bond actor have with a Bond girl in the film. Their chemistry is so good. Plus, we have Mads Mikkelsen as Lashif. Those card scenes are some of the best. Like, oh my god, like for real. Like their card scenes are so brutal, and like how Lashif has like the blood where it cries down his face when he's like gets like bothered and stuff like that. It's so good. About the only thing you could kind of maybe say is wrong with this film compared to other Bond films prior to it is there's not a lot of tech in this movie. They went for a much more grounded, more realistic Bond in this movie. Yeah, he is so creepy for real. My friend's saying it right now. He is so creepy for real. Like just like Lashif, Mads Mikkelsen's villain, he's played very well. And oh man, that's what I said. There's not a lot of tech in this movie, as I was saying, but I still think Daniel Craig slams it out of the park in this first portrayal for James Bond. It's got a good score to it as well. That action scene when he's driving the car, that one scene and he crashes the car when Vespa's on the road and he flips the car, like there's a lot of good stunt work in this movie. It's wild. Casino Royale is one of those ones when I saw it, I was like, especially after the Brosnan era for me, because I'm not a huge fan of that. When I saw Casino Royale, I was like, damn, we're back. James Bond is like freaking back. Here we go. I can't wait for the next one. But now we're on to my number 2. And my number 2, everybody knows Sean Connery is my favorite. I do have a soft spot for Sean Connery. I love him to death. And rest in peace, I miss him too. My number 2 pick, my favorite Sean Connery Bond film is Thunderball. I love Thunderball. I think this one is just such a good film. Like this was one of the early Bond films that I saw too. This is probably like the second or third Bond film I saw. And when I first got introduced to Bond, I literally thought Sean Connery was just it. So when I saw Roger Moore and I saw George Lazenby, I thought it was kind of like a joke. I was like, "Where's Sean Connery?" I was like, "This is a joke, right? Like these are silly." And especially because Roger Moore's are played more for camp. But man, Thunderball is the one that I really think has a good template for it. I love the intro sequence where we get to see Sean Connery use the jetpack, like that famous, we see a lot of that famous shot where Sean Connery has the helmet and he has the jetpack and he flies off. That's our amazing intro scene to Thunderball. So another thing I love about Thunderball too is this was the first movie to really use underwater camera work. And like a lot of James Bond films, a lot throughout this whole entire list, they were the first kind of films to do a lot of stuff technology wise in films. And as I said, Thunderball, those underwater sequences, even though you can't hear like talking and there's no real audio and they don't really like play a lot of music, I kind of like seeing like just that rawness of that original film, of that ambition, and it's done really well. I think it ages very well to see those scenes of those guys fighting underwater, seeing Sean Connery sneak under there with Largo's men, and they're shooting each other with the harpoon guns and everything. And I think Largo's an underrated villain for sure. Like he's been done again in Never Say Never Again. They did a different version of him, but I love this version of him in this movie, especially like with the eye patch. Like he's just is such a good portrayal. Domino as our main Bond girl, I think she's underrated too as a Bond girl. She does a lot more action stuff, I think, compared to some of the other Bond girls in later films. And for me, like Thunderball, I just have a blast going through this movie. I always get really into one of my favorite scenes is when Sean Connery is dancing with the lady in this one, and they're kind of dancing, having that party, and he sees the guy behind the tree, like in the corner with the gun, and he's about to pull out the gun and shoot at Bond, and real quick Bond turns and she gets shot in the back and he just like lays her by the table and he's like, sorry, she's dead. And like he just like it's just such a line that he delivers, and Sean Connery, like you laugh even though it's like something just how you're like, damn, this girl's like dead. But like the way Sean Connery delivers his lines, it's just money. Like I said, he's the for me the Bond for sure, no matter what. Even though a lot of Daniel Craig's you'll see are in this top five, there's three of his catalog in my top five. But that's because Daniel Craig's like his storylines are really freaking good. But now we're here. Let's pack away all this junk, all these notes and everything, because we're here to talk about the top dog, my favorite one, my number one. I'm gonna take a drink.
It's too much.
My favorite Bond film of all time, Skyfall, is Skyfall is such a good freaking film. Like if you haven't seen this film, you need to treat yourself and go watch this film. It's directed by Sam Mendes. Drum roll, drum roll, please. Yeah, drum roll. Skyfall, baby. Like I love it. This title song is done by Adele, who I think she slams it out of the park. I think this is in my top three favorite Bond songs, intro title songs. Skyfall, it's so good by Adele. I have literally banged this song on my phone, like, playing it or playing it in the car. Like, it's that good. And I think Daniel Craig in this one, it's the most personal Bond film, I think, besides George Lazenby's where he gets married to Tracy. I think this one is, James Bond's most personal one before that, you know what I mean? And then we got No Time to Die, of course. So before we got No Time to Die, because Skyfall came first. And the way that Mr. Silva, Javier Bardem, plays Mr. Silva, who is, I think, the best Bond villain, in my opinion. He just is. Even though he's not like a traditional, like, oh, I'm out to get Bond. He's more into M, and he's after M. But I love the fact that we get a villain who has a personal vendetta with M, and we've never really gotten that before. So to see that, it's so good. Like Mr. Silva, just Javier Bardem's first entrance when we see him, when Daniel Craig's in the chair, strapped to the chair, and we see the elevator coming down, and Javier Bardem walks out and starts talking about the island that him and his grandma had and how it got infested with rats, and how what they did was they trapped the rats in an oil drum, and all they did was start eating each other, and now they turned them into the rats only eat rats. Like, oh, it's so good. It's such a good dialogue line. Like, for real, Skyfall is the best written, I think the best directed, the best acted Bond film, like by far. Like, I love other Bond films, I really do, but Skyfall just hits home in so many ways. Even the dialogue between Daniel Craig in this film and Q, because this is the first film where we get introduced to Q again. He wasn't in Casino Royale or Quantum of Solace, which was Daniel Craig's first two. He wasn't in those ones. So when we get to this one, it's just damn, like I really did like the new introduction of Q, and that scene when Daniel Craig's sitting with him and he gives him like a little radio, and he gives him the Walter PPK that only reacts to his palm print. Like, it's just so many iconic stuff in this film. Like, oh, it's just really good. Like I said, it's kind of sad that we have a Bond girl in this one that gets taken out really fast. Like, she gets dropped really fast, and it's kind of sad because Javier Bardem just like uses her hardcore. But man, Skyfall, like, I still to this day when I watch it, I get emotional when I see M, Judi Dench's M, die. Like, because I'm like, even though I wasn't a fan of Pierce Brosnan's era of James Bond films, Judi Dench just really did capture that character so good. Like, every scene that she was in, even if I don't like Pierce Brosnan's movies, like every scene that she was in, I think was captivating. Like, that's how good Judi Dench is. So to see her in this one, and she dies, and I was just like, damn, man, like it was such a powerful moment. And I like the way that it ties back to Skyfall Manor, where James Bond grew up. So we get to see, like I said, this is a very personal film. Like before, like No Time to Die, I think this is the most personal James Bond film, and it still to this day I think packs a punch. Like even though No Time to Die came out and they did that whole storyline with James Bond having a daughter and stuff like that, and him not being able to grow up with his daughter, like this Skyfall was just powerful for me. Still to this day, it hits hard. I still do, like I said, get emotional. But that's my James Bond ranking. All 25 of the James Bond Ian production films. It's out there now. It's finally out there on the tube first, because I was trying to edit this and going to shoot this video and edit it with my laptop and have all kinds of cool graphics and posters from the movies, but my laptop finally shit it out on me, so we wanted to do it live. But it's cool because now I could talk to you guys and you could chime in and tell me what you loved about the films and stuff like that, or what are your favorite Bond moments. So let's just leave it open now. Like, what do you guys want to talk about? Let's see. Who else we got in the chat? Yeah, we got a little bit more time. Like I said, yeah, Dench does rules. My buddy right there says, yeah, she does. Judi Dench rules. Like, every scene she's in, she's just so powerful. Like, like her chemistry is just there with all the Bond actors, Daniel Craig, Pierce Brosnan. I wish Judi Dench got to do some stuff with like Roger Moore. That would have been kind of cool. Don't. But yeah, oh man, like I said, James Bond being one of my favorite franchises. Like I said, I love returning to this one because even though like I like Bond because the franchise is filled with like realistic characters that do have realistic arcs, but they are in like this far-fetched like kind of fantasy world of like spies and all this like crazy stuff going on, but the characters do have some character growth and arcs going on in it and stuff, and it's like you can attach to it, you can understand it and stuff like that, and that's why I love it. But oh man, thanks for hanging out with me, guys. Like I might actually just get another drink real quick. Let me go grab another drink real quick.
That was a bit extra.
Bit extra. We have some dessert too. Actually, we should get a muffin.
I'm just
or a pound cake. I have some desserts too. I might do a muffin or a pound cake. Made some green chili stew today. That's what I made for dinner. Green chili stew. Put that right there. So yeah, I made some of that stuff today. Just hung out. Wrote some of my script stuff for this film. Checked out the Penguins. That's why I have my Penguins gear on. Checked out the Penguins as we won and beat the Anaheim Ducks. Second win in a row. We just beat the Capitals the other night, so I was really happy about that one. Denver Nuggets played tonight too. My boy Jokic is up there, but I don't know the score yet. Don't tell me. We played my boy Blitz Tuner. We played his Spurs, the San Antonio Spurs tonight, but I didn't watch that game. Yes, I'm a big sports fan, as you can tell. I always got sports gear on a lot too, or like sports memorabilia, because I'm a huge sports fan. Love movies, love sports of all kinds. So that's why I'm always talking about the only movies. Ugh. Big surprise, Yotes lost. Oh no, really? The Coyotes lost? Damn, bro. I'm sorry. Those freaking Phoenix Suns are banging though, dude. Like they're rolling. Phoenix Suns are rolling. And we got the Cardinals. We got the Rams got the Cardinals on Monday. So we got you guys. So at least you got two other teams that are just balling all crazy, trying to go for the championships. But yeah, I might, as I said, maybe cap off tonight and drink a couple more beers and watch the Nuggets game and then fall asleep, Maybe munch on a blueberry muffin and get fat. I'm a sucker for muffins, so might do that. Daughter here over here decorating with some Christmas stuff.
I'm just like trying to be quiet so you don't.
You're good. It doesn't matter. It's all live. The only people here are my buddies, my friends. Maybe Tommy. Tommy might be there. My PYT. She might be in the chat if she's there watching.
Oh, cute.
But yep, definitely. Thanks for hanging out, y'all. It's about an hour and 20 minutes in. And like I said, yep, have a good one, brother. Like, for real, yeah, I might crash out too, like I said, after I watch the basketball game and stuff like that. And I'm just glad to get this in here, get this video up. all my Bond stuff and everything. As I said, everybody in the comment section of this video, because you haven't caught it live, let me know in the comments section what are your favorite Bond moments, favorite Bond films, and all that stuff. And we could have a good chat of all these cinema moments that we love. Peace out, you all.